Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a show about music, education, and technology. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Hello.
Hey, Robby.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to meet you face to face.
I know. Well, I feel like I've actually seen this exact framing of you in videos, and I know, like, through our small interactions and also just talking to Teresa about some of your work over the years, it almost doesn't feel like we've never spoken in real time before.
Right. You know, and Teresa, she's doing all this research. Let me put my headphones on. I'm going to leave them partly off because I got my son downstairs. Yeah, she talks about, like, these parasocial relationships between, like, people who you have, like, sort of encountered in these online spaces or podcasts that you've never met face to face. So yeah, I think it's interesting because you recognize these people's voices or, like, see their images and then, like, kind of meet them at some point, which is pretty cool. I like that.
I like that too. It's one of the things I kind of don't know how to say this. I feel like there were, like, little traces of, like, good things actually, and like I think, like, looking back on, like, old Twitter is people like to romanticize it, but there were some, like, little traces of some really interesting relationships that happened there. Several people, like, I have people who I know who I like who come on this show. I have people who stay with me when they're in town who I've met on Twitter, who are in the field, and so yeah, I'm doing so much less of the social media lately, so it doesn't really feel like a thing. But
yeah, and I feel like I transitioned onto Blue Sky, and I feel like it's not the same community that there was on Twitter.
Yeah,
and it's pretty different in other social media spaces. Like I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and kind of just pay attention to what's going on there and participate. And they're all, I feel like, different spaces and different communities.
This is why I don't ever buy any criticism, or rather, like, criticism against the criticism of these social platforms and these, like, apps and experiences they've created and their power to influence people. Because I think actually the algorithm being one thing, but also just the user interface design of some of these tools does so much to suggest to users what the culture of the platform is. I think of TikTok as, like, entertainment. I don't really interact with people there like I do on any of the other ones, which is limited even at best. My feed is, like, mostly, like, music, like great musicians playing things, and then, like, funny Pokemon memes. Like, that's, like, kind of what it is. And I don't know. I don't think of it as, like, a place where I'm going to go and participate necessarily. I do. It's funny. I do, like, my most successful social account is TikTok because I had a very viral video back in 2020. But that's
okay.
Yeah, that's, like, it though. Is, you know, I don't know. It's just Blue Sky is sort of scratches the itch, but I just don't think it has the volume of people on it.
No,
I don't think anything's ever going to get that volume of people that's a Twitter like anytime ever again. I think it's done. I can think, like, Twitter. Was so much for even, like, the, like, whatever percentage of, let's just say, as a big platform like Facebook, whatever percentage of Facebook users were active daily on Twitter in its peak, even that it was an apparent ask for people to sign up for just one more thing. Like, I don't see everybody just, like, agreeing upon another micro blogging social media site.
Right. I know. And it's funny what you were saying about TikTok because it's so opposite for me. Like, I sat down, I think, for, like, an hour just hitting the, like, do not show me this, because I only wanted music ed specific stuff because I didn't want to get sucked into the entertainment just because of time. So it's kind of funny how people use these different platforms for different reasons, and I'm trying, like, I have to really control, like, not getting sucked in to, like, go down these rabbit holes of stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll just
I've done a lot of personal work and some work on my stuff, my computers, to, like, try to just do not long form just for the sake of long form. Like, I think there's plenty of great uses for short form media, but, like, I'm just trying to, like, read more books and, like, listen to audio books too, and you know, podcasts. But even with podcasting, it's easy to slip. So some of my podcast listening is, like, repeat hosts of the same show, and there's, like, a format. Like, it almost just becomes like it's fine for, like, doing the dishes and not being bored, but, like, it becomes sort of a loop that I'm in where it's like I'm listening to the
Yeah.
personalities, not necessarily like learning or growing, which is absolutely a thing that you can do on that medium. So just trying to like stretch out a little bit at every
Uh-huh.
area of life, playing longer video games, watching longer like YouTube video essays on stuff. And I deleted all the Meta stuff off my. I'm signed into Meta's stuff in Chrome on this computer that I'm talking to you on, and that's it. And the inconvenience is powerful. Like Chrome is
Uh-huh.
like a get stuff done
Yeah.
browser for me on this computer. So it's like I use them to, like I didn't have
Hmm.
the contact for someone I wanted to hire to adjudicate we're doing like two of our bands are going to be instead of an adjudication, we didn't have district funds to take everyone. We have 4 bands. So we're doing 2 of them at our school. We're just sort of like designing our own version of that experience. But we did want clinicians. And one of them, I was like, well, we're Facebook friends, so I guess I'll just log in and talk to her. And I couldn't even do it on my phone. I had to sit down at a desk and
It's needed. I think there's less short form video is needed and more long form engagement and
yeah.
human
I really
engagement
kind of wish there
of
was a
just people to
way
people. Yeah,
to
absolutely.
just not like because the phone. I feel really like good about the stretches of my life where I just don't have the phone. Um, trying to figure that. Like I
Hmm.
periodically like just leave it on my desk at work, and then an hour or two come back, and I'm like I didn't
Hmm.
even miss that not being there, and I felt like a little bit more present, like with what I was doing the whole
Yeah.
entire time. That I wasn't pinging. I still have like a watch on. I guess I could like emergency phone call someone if I
Hmm.
fell or something. But like, yeah.
Right.
It's a tricky thing. So many people depend on these things for professional purposes too. So like, I mean, what you're doing is and I would hate to feel like I had to
Right.
like work against because like what you're doing in TikTok. I mean, that's like not how it's designed to be used. So you're kind of working against its wishes for you.
Right. Right. I know it's funny because I'm basically like I use it to get a sense of like what are people talking about, what's going on in these spaces. And then when I'm sharing out, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm putting into TikTok is not really of the culture of TikTok. It's very sort of like here's some things to think about in music ed, or here's what I'm thinking about in music ed. And it's not like comedic. It's not it doesn't really fit the sort of like
Yeah.
the culture of what the platform is like oriented for. So I feel like it's sort of odd. Like I feel like odd in TikTok.
There's definitely some like video editing and speech pacing trends that I've noticed that are good on TikTok, but I do feel like it is the most like, and this is where I actually do have a fair amount of optimism about what algorithms can be. Like, it does feel the most capable of getting like reaching your maximum audience. If you have like a very like a kind of thought that's not really going to perform well
Hmm.
in engagement, I'm doing air quotes, is um also like is this the show?
I don't know, whatever you want it to be.
do you do you want to
I'm very go with the flow, so whatever you want this to be, I'm
I'm
happy
that
to
too,
do
but I
it.
kind of this was on my list of things to maybe address with you anyway. So I mean, I do you do you feel comfortable introducing yourself? Is that
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Evan Tobias. I'm on the music learning and teaching faculty at Arizona State University. And I tend to work on helping people think through what music education can be in terms of like updating and expanding programs. I tend to sort of float around in the sort of secondary context and more often than not focusing on things that are not just band, orchestra, and choir and helping people think through those spaces. But I also help people kind of think through what band, orchestra, and choir could be if it was sort of augmented and moved in other kinds of directions. So I kind of move in that direction, and I teach both undergrad and grad courses at ASU. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything.
yeah? And I mean, you sorry to bounce back to the to the thing. We're gonna talk about a lot of that, but
Yeah,
I also I
sure.
mean, you know, you're engaging in some of these topics on these platforms, and I feel like no matter
Hmm.
how many people in the world want to engage with that, or even how many people want to use a scrolling short form video platform to engage with that, like I feel like the maximum number of people who are there for it, that's like going to be the platform where you're going to most likely reach them. is at least if I don't know if the algorithm has dramatically changed under the new deal and everything, or even I'm sure they're also tweaking it ever in favor of showing more ads. So
Yeah. It's weird. Like I think when I first started using Instagram and TikTok as a place to like show up with myself being there, I felt like an outsider, but I also felt like I'm in a weird space where I'm in academia and a big part of my job is to do research and to share information, to share things and to like engage with folks. And a lot of that work because of like the sort of, and I'm at a research one university, so it's a lot about like publishing research and peer reviewed journals and things of that sort. And for a long time, um, like the kinds of content, I don't want to call it content, but like research, the things that I'm producing, the things that like folks in academia are producing are going into book chapters and peer reviewed journals. But for practitioners, they're often locked behind paywalls and inaccessible unless it's in sort of like an open access journal or a journal that's not behind a paywall, or if someone's like in a grad program where they have access to their libraries. And so for a long time, that sort of frustration of people not having access was bubbling up. And I was just thinking, like, why not just be in these spaces where everyone else is rather than trying to like send people to these sort of places that are not where people are organically. And so it's not like to say that we shouldn't be publishing research in peer-reviewed journals, but that there maybe is a space to bring that kind of thinking into social media platforms where it is easily accessible and it can sort of immediately kind of foster like communication and engagement and discussion. And even if like no one responds, it's sort of like out there in the ether in a way where it's more accessible and maybe someone encounters it at some other point in time. So I think that was sort of my initial thinking and wanting to be a part of it and kind of sharing ideas in it. And then who, with the algorithms, who I have no idea who is, I mean, you could see like this was liked by this many people or these people saw it, but I'm not really tending to look at that stuff. And it's just like, it's out there and people may do what they want or what they might not want. But I don't really understand how the algorithm is working or what factors into the algorithm. And I just wonder, like, I know what my algorithm looks like, but I have no idea what anyone else is. So who knows what they're seeing or, you know, what their bubble is. I mean, I think that's the thing that concerns me about the algorithm is how, unless you're deliberately trying to shape it, just your everyday engagement can end up being sort of like an echo chamber of things. And that's just kind of a phenomenon for us to think through. I don't really know what to do about that, but it's like a thing.
Yeah, I think there's like an extra layer to the challenge of that, which is like, I don't think it feels like you're in an echo chamber when you're on one of these things because you're seeing things, you know, at least until recent years, you're seeing mostly the posts of people who are real. And, but the challenge is that like, it's not like I have this like very strange thing where it's like growing up, this is like an extrovert thing. I would always feel like a cosmic, like a grand connection to people whenever I'd watch live television growing up. Be like, if you just feel like, other people are doing this, specifically this right now, and I'm not outside. It's like 9 p.m., but I don't know. Or like you could think of like watching the ball drop on New Year's or something, where you know it's just like yes, lots of people have gathered to do this same as activity right now, even though I can't necessarily like see or interact or you know have a human connection with them. That's like. There's like a perception of that happening when you're on these social platforms, but it's not the same. I'm not seeing the same thing as someone else. I'm not getting the same ads. I'm not seeing the same posts recycled over and over and over again. And so, I mean, it's just, I'm a little bit in like a doomer state about these things, but I realize that there's people on these things. I mean, do you find that with your engagement? I'm assuming that some of your videos you'll like cross post. Will you do like when you do one of the ones where you're like talking, asking a question or giving a thought, will that go on like YouTube, Instagram, and do you feel like there's
I'm usually like recording it and then I put it into TikTok and then Instagram so that because I find that it's hard to know again with the algorithms. It seems to me there are different groups of music teachers that are more, I tend to spend more time in TikTok or I tend to spend more time in Instagram with some people in both spaces. That's just based only on what I could see from my algorithm. So I kind of put it into both spaces and it's the same exact thing. Like it's not like I'm changing one or the other for the style of the aesthetic or the culture of those platforms. And then with YouTube, that's a little bit more friction, so it doesn't happen as like I'm not at the same time putting it into a YouTube short just because that's additional friction. And I'm literally doing these for the most part, like as I'm walking from my car where I park in the couple of minutes it takes to get to campus, because that's when I have time to do it. So it's like, boom, 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 let me put this. Maybe I'll do like a bunch of them and then kind of put them in over time. So I'm just kind of putting them out there. And I find that I tend to get more conversation in TikTok than Instagram, which surprised me at first because I just didn't think like people would want to hear these kinds of things in TikTok, and that was like just an assumption that I made, which was wrong. But yeah, that's why I'm putting them into both of these spaces, and then YouTube is like every once in a while I'll put something.
Do you feel like, and judging this based on, again, knowing that like the algorithm is not a thing we completely understand, but like I guess likes, favorites, amount of comments, do you get a feeling that TikTok has more engagement?
I can only speak for me because I don't know what other people are doing, but it does seem to like I could say like when I put something on TikTok, when I put something on Instagram, there's just more general engagement across the board, whether it's like likes or people who are I'm more interested. I don't really care about the likes. What I'm looking for is dialogue. So I get more comments in TikTok than I do Instagram, and I think maybe more people see it in TikTok than Instagram, but I don't know. Like I'm not looking at the analytics. I guess there is a way to like look at the analytics to see reach and all that kind of stuff, but I don't have time for that.
You're right. So, I mean, I guess that was my next question is like, do you feel like the kind of comments and discussion is different in any way from, like, I very much think that when I log into, say, like, Instagram threads, again, coming back to microblogging, like, there's a very specific type of content that I see when I log into that, and it's one that repulses me, so I get off there. And I don't know that speaks for the whole platform or just, like, what they're shoving in front of my face.
I don't know. I would have to think on that. I think that people who comment on my Instagram are more often people who know me, like actually have like know who I am as a person, like maybe have taken a class with me or been in our program at ASU, and then occasionally other people, and then the people in TikTok for the most part, I don't think they know who I am. Like I'm just like a person on TikTok. I don't know who knows what people know about one another, but I think the comments are more I guess I get into more conversation back and forth on TikTok, which I enjoy. That's why I like the sort of engagement, or I'll go in there and comment on someone's post or whatever you call it on TikTok. and I like that sort of dialogue, and I feel like I learn a lot from the dialogue. I learn a lot about how people are thinking about things. And so it feels more engaging to me in TikTok, which again, that really surprised me.
I do feel like if I had to guess, it's probably reaching a wider range of people who really are interested and maybe want to engage on that level. If I had to guess, I don't know. It's
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, and again, like not my disinterest in playing that game is a big reason. Part of it's like, okay, well, I don't know how to do an in between where I'm like sort of in these places, so I'm a little bit just a lurker. I'm actually on Mastodon too. I don't know if you are on.
Oh, I think I did. I have an account on Mastodon, and I just never really. I guess I went into the blue sky end of things and stayed there. But you know what? Like, if there's a thing that I would possibly be interested in, like if I had more time to look into, it's the whole AT protocol. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, but I'm really fascinated by these sort of decentralized systems and platforms that are popping up that are not part of a corporate structure. And I know like Mastodon is a different one, I think, than Blue Sky when it comes to these protocols.
Mastodon is called
I don't know enough about them
and that is one of the Instagram Threads actually plays with that a little bit. Like you can follow an Instagram Threads user account from a Mastodon and never not even have the Threads app installed. I think it's now a Threads user. I'm not sure if they have added the other way around. I mean, they made a whole big thing when they launched it about like, oh yeah, we're going to play with Federation, and of course, like that's what they say they're going to do until they're not going to do it anymore. And then Blue Sky has a different one. But the thing I don't understand,
That's the AT
Right. What I
protocol,
don't
I
understand
think.
is that I don't know of anything else that's built on that other than Blue Sky's products. I know that like a lot of people use ActivityPub. There's an alternative actually TikTok called Loops. There's an alternative YouTube. There's like a
Okay.
whole federation out there of apps that no regular person is ever going to use and they're never going to gain traction. But like the idea being that like actually you could build all sorts of different kinds of social platforms on these protocols. And Mastodon maintains the protocol, but they don't by any means like own and control it. They of course also have their app, and then you need a server to host the data, and they manage and maintain the most popular server, which is mastodon.social. So they're like very heavily involved, but it's a pretty open thing. I'm a big believer in it. I just, feel like a crazy person whenever I'm talking.
Yeah, to your point about like typical people are not accessing these variations of things. Yeah, that's probably why I don't spend a whole lot of time on Mastodon. But with the AT protocol, the stuff that I've been finding recently is the reason why I'm attracted to it is it seems like people are starting to build out I don't know if the right word would be like a platform or a service or what it is, but it's part of this whole knowledge graph thing where you can be sharing information, ideas, like various kinds of content, and it's all going to sort of like link together and live across all these different systems. And I do kind of like the idea of things being off of, like, you were saying Meta before, like so much of people's engagement are locked within these corporations. And, like sometimes I'm like, I don't even want to be contributing to Meta. I don't want to be contributing to these things. But that's where people are. So you find yourself like, okay, if I want to be engaging with music ed folks, they're in these spaces, they're not in these other spaces. But these other kinds of things that are sort of happening, I don't know if they'll ever become mainstream, but I think it will be interesting to see how we can like work with them to take things off of the sort of corporate containers and get them into another space where you can get people to access them and they're living in another kind of space. I just don't know enough.
I think the
about
only
it
way have you read
means.
Cory Doctorow's book, the one that he was making the rounds with?
No, but is this where he's talking about enshittification and
That's
things
the
of
one.
that
He's
sort?
been on all that.
Yeah.
He's been everywhere the past year. But no, I mean, I read it. It was interesting. I think I drink a little bit of his Kool-Aid. Like I think he's on to some stuff. I think the thing that I was really encouraged by was, I was like, okay, like I was excited to see him name drop Mastodon, a few of these other federated things, and his whole thing is he's like listen, like it's really just like weird nerds are going to be on Mastodon, but if we regulated some of these big tech companies, like the government could say Twitter has to let you take your data out or make it available to someone who's on a different server of a different micro blogging post thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I have faith that they would, but I like the idea that, because I don't think nobody is ripping it apart. Like there's going to be Facebook, like that's going to be a thing that exists. But you're right. Like I don't want my stop putting almost any data in there. So it would be cool. I mean, especially when like the primary content that is there that I'm interested in seeing on there or that people would want to see from me is like photos and text. Like that's not a difficult thing to be able to throw a rope over a wall to some other way of looking at text and images that people have posted. Yeah, I mean, it's doable. I don't know. I'm cynical about us getting to there, but it's clear to me that this is like what would make actually the internet like a much better place to be.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like before I was ever doing social media stuff, I have like this blog that I've had since, oh my God, back into the early 2000s. And I used to do it a lot. And then I think once I got a job in higher ed, I don't do it as much. But like there was always this sort of idea of like when you're putting that content on a blog and it's not like a WordPress.com. In my case, it's like WordPress, but I'm using Bluehost as a service. So it's not locked into it like a particular corporation. All that stuff is living in your own platform. And I thought about this too, and I started a newsletter, and I was like, I don't want to use Substack. I don't want to use these other services. And Substack had all kinds of other issues going on that I just didn't want to contribute to that. And I started using MailChimp, I think it was, and I moved over to like MailerLite. And again, it's these kinds of systems where you like kind of own, you as the person own the content, and it's not living in this other space. I mean, it's on the cloud, but it's not, a corporation can't just shut down access to it and you would lose it all. And I think when people were not unsure of what was going to happen to TikTok, as it was sort of in that transitory state where like there wasn't a buyer yet and we weren't even sure it was going to get shut down, and you saw these people sort of like freaking out a little bit about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to all of my content. And I was thinking like, I'm not worried about that at all, because I just, from like a way of being, I never put something straight to the platform. It's always like recorded on my phone, and then I can put it into these other spaces, but there's always like a copy that stays with me. And so I think whatever new things keep coming out, there's always a sort of like a principle or an ethic of like, keep it where you have access to it, so it's not stuck in some other space where you can get shut off from it. And I think that's just like a good way to be. I know it's like a little bit of an extra hassle and work to do that, but I think it's a good thing to think through.
Well, some of these principles of digital use apply to social media, but they also apply to productivity, which is
nice segue there. Go ahead.
I'm thinking of interconnected ideas. I'm thinking about owning your data, having your data be portable. I mean, one of the main things that I get excited about is like, I want to talk about your like research in what specifically you research, but I know that like being in your role and having to wrangle and make sense of so many, like reading so many journal articles and just all, that sounds legitimately so overwhelming to me. But I'm also like a little bit aware of some of the tools that I use that really help me to wrangle lots of data. And I'm sure that there are some things specific to your workflow. Like, I mean, I know you're an Obsidian. Are you still using Obsidian?
Oh yeah, it's like
right.
The hub for everything for me.
So like, I mean, well, do you want to talk about the research itself first, or to go into the tools? I mean, you're someone who like, I feel like you see where the technology can be front and center, like an essential part of the medium where music is being created, but also like as a layer of structure or organization, or just a supplementary tool for someone to be more productive. Like you sort of see how it fits into every facet of music education. So that I thought would be one of the many reasons it would be fun to talk to you today.
Yeah. So let me talk about. I'll go in reverse and talk about that last thing you mentioned about like the technology in music ed. And then I could talk through like the workflow of everything, and you could just stop me whenever. So yeah, to your point about the technology being everywhere, I do think about music technology both in terms of like content and structure, and then also as a tool. And I think where my head, consistent with like whatever new technology comes out or whenever I'm talking to people about technology, for me it's the tool or technique has always been secondary to like the way that people engage with technology. And when I remember when I first came across the term technological determinism, I was like, yes, this is a thing that I think about a lot, where people might say technology is going to do this, and it could either be like a positive or a negative thing. Like technology is going to wreck music education, or technology is going to be the savior of music education. You can like be along this continuum. And for me, it's like, well, it's not the technology, it's how people are engaging with the technology and what they see in terms of its possibilities. So for instance, when we think about technology in a music program and in terms of the content, I like to think about the possibilities that technology offers to help us think about possibilities that don't necessarily exist in music education typically. And so there is this sort of like administrative use of technology. There's the technology to support us in doing the things that we typically do, like technology to help students sight read, technology to help us be more efficient in rehearsal, technology to, record students performing and then listen to it and provide them with feedback. And these are all great. I'm not saying these are not good uses. But then there's also technology to help us think about what else might we be doing in our curriculum. And so I think, for instance, like when I talk to folks who are elementary general music teachers and we think about like the elements of music, and something that I often chat about in my classes is like those elements of music, we tend to treat them as sort of universal. as if all musics would address these elements of music, and they do. Like, we do see them in lots of musics. But if we started sometimes with digital music making and technology, we might have other ways of thinking through elements of music, or just other ways of thinking through what we might focus on. So, for instance, when people are creating music with technology, they might synthesize sound, and they might play with timbres, and they might try to understand the difference between different kinds of kick drums. Or we were just having a conversation the other day in one of my classes about, can you identify an open hi-hat, a closed hi-hat, and then what that would signify in terms of different genres of music, and whether you're making trap music or you're making some other kind of music, and to be able to sift through all the digital sounds or to synthesize that, and how that's just as much thinking about aural skills as like being able to transcribe a melody or identifying intervals and things of that sort. So I think for me, technology offers these kinds of interesting spaces to think about what else we could be doing, and that has been consistent whenever a new technology comes out, whether it's like AI right now and having people think through that, or back when the Victrola talking machine first came out and people were like either embracing it or freaking out about what recorded music would be in music education. There's always this sense of like, well, what does this technology offer, both in terms of supporting what we do, but then what does it offer in terms of what else we could be thinking about? And that's been a thing. And then I also think a lot about sort of how we place technology in programs. So, for instance, in the secondary program, we will sometimes see a music technology class. And I think there's more of these happening, but it's not necessarily ubiquitous yet, even in 2026. Not all schools have music technology courses. In fact, when we look at the secondary landscape, not all schools have something besides band, orchestra, and choir, let alone a music technology class. But like, there is that sort of compartmentalization sometimes of like, we'll put music technology in the music technology class, and that's where students will engage with it. And then you can have even more specialization, like, oh, we're going to have a beat making music technology class, or we're going to have a DJing music technology class, or we're going to have an audio production music technology class. And those are like even more specialized. Or you could have a more like, we're going to have a music technology class with multiple pathways, or we're going to have a music technology class that's fine arts oriented, or a music technology class that's career and tech ed oriented, or a class that allows multiple of those pathways. So I think a lot about pluralities and then very specialized ways of kind of treating technology. And I know that you're a person who's using technology heavily in an ensemble context, and I feel like there's all kinds of possibilities with that as well. And then additionally, what could an ensemble be like if we introduce some of the technologies that are like atypical for an ensemble? Like, what is a large ensemble when we throw a DJ controller in there, or what is a large ensemble when some students have like pushes and they're sampling what the trumpet players are doing, and like, it's just kind of interesting things to think about of what else we could be doing. So that's been just something that I think about constantly. And I get very excited when I see people doing cool things with technology across the field, because there's just so much great stuff happening. And I think I wish it was happening more than it is.
Yeah, I do. It's interesting to think about like how you can shake things up, I guess. My general music class is doing some Chrome Music Lab this week. And we've discovered the oscillator, and I'm like, oh, this is an opportunity to talk about some concepts. And I'm like explaining frequency and pitch, and they're dragging little like. Have you seen this? The one with the like, it's like a triangle, a square, and a circle, but they make like different sound waves. And I'm seeing like light bulbs go off, and they're like, they're just having fun, like dragging their mouse up and down and making woo woo sounds, from their seats. And it just dawns on me, and I'm like, I don't know that anyone in this class has a very concrete understanding of melody, even though I've tried to teach it in every possible combination of words I can. But this maybe should have been the beginning of the year that we took this tool out, because I think the concept is a little bit more clear when you stick the right thing in front of them. So yeah, I mean, there's so much you can do. Well, you mentioned the performing ensemble. I mean, this is something that I really feel like my own experiences has put me in a little bit of a, like, not a crisis, but like when I'm presenting at conferences, I am often in the wing of the space where the people who probably teach, Ableton Live are people who teach where the primary vehicle by which they're making music is like with computer software. So I get to, these have become many of my friends, and I've seen their sessions, and I teach general music, so like this is part of our curriculum, like this is content that I do, but there's just like this very interesting like I feel like people who teach this, many of the people all over the world who do, are like advocating very strongly for commercial music programs, for the technology itself, all these things. They're fighting this fight to bring music to students who might not otherwise engage with it. And in my community, like performing arts are very popular. Like I don't know what to say. Like we don't have that many people enrolled in our general music classes at our school. We have lots of kids in band, choir, and orchestra, and that part of that just starts in elementary school and then continues on. But what I hear when I'm around people in these circles is lots of ideas for like what are some like progressive ideas for like performing arts that maybe shake up the model a little bit, or that get kids creating, or that I've had composition assignments before. We've done the putting the E in an ensemble project is one of the ones that's proven to be most successful for me in that environment. But like there comes a point where I feel like I don't engage our community with some of these things, and I like to put out feelers. I have a Google survey I put out once every couple quarters of the school year just to kind of see like what's working from my band students. And what I keep running into, at least in the past 5 years, is they just really want to play their instruments. I'm like, I keep trying all these ideas and thinking like, because I see so much value and merit to shaking up the model and putting them in the creative role, and having them, experience music through things other than like knowing all of their scales on a saxophone, and then they come back and they're like, we just really like to play. So help me with this, because I do feel like there's a lot of buzz surrounding, and specifically the performing arts, because we're behind in lots of ways. But I also trying to be responsive to my community, and this is also there's also like, of course, tremendous benefits to doing things a little bit more in the box. You can be super productive when you're in the box, and you have routines built up over every day and all that. So I don't know. Do you have a response to this? Am I even asking a question?
Yeah, I think. Well, let me get just quick clarification. When you're saying my community, are you referring to the students in your program, or are you referring more globally to like other?
I think it's a district. It's just like part of our district's culture. It's in our DNA. But I also think it's like specifically my school. Like if I give stop what I was doing for a week to do like a soundtrack project, I don't know that they would like many of them would hang. Now I do know though, and here's the thing, and I know that there'd be one or two of them who would be the greatest thing they've ever done in band, and they would think about it for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. So I think I have. Let me just give a caveat that like I'm not making in whatever answer I give, I'm not saying like this is the way it ought to be or this is what you should do. It's just kind of riffing on the ideas. I think, to your point, the fact that you're responding to your community is sort of like the most important thing, right? Like you said you're giving them surveys, you're talking to them, and you're trying to get a sense of what they want. And that I think is super important, especially when you're trying to offer additional or new things. You don't want to be in a situation where you're pushing students out of the ensemble. Like the things that you're doing are making students not want to be there. That doesn't make any sense. I think also I'm always thinking about, you said it's very popular, so I think some of this discourse, when you hear people talking about changing things, is also thinking through the fact that like when you look at a lot of secondary programs, there's the students who are in the ensemble, and then there are students who are not necessarily in the ensemble, and they might not have another thing to do. In your case, they have students have ensemble, and they have other things they could do besides the ensemble because there's the general music opportunity. So I think that's a contextual thing to think through. But when it comes to like trying new things and seeing what the students like, I think that's an interesting thing to think through. So when you're doing the soundtrack project, is it sort of like separate from what they're doing? Like there's the ensemble thing that they're doing, and then there's like a soundtrack project where they're on computers, but it's like a separate thing?
Well, when you say what does a separate thing mean? I mean, it is happening usually like, concurrently with some other musical goals. But there's
can you describe like a typical soundtrack project?
I've only ever really done the one. I've not done it every single year since we were out of school, but it's it's usually like so I usually have to like break it down in small phases. And to be totally clear, it's very good for us. Like many of our students have never tried to record to a click track before. And that is like, for someone who expects them to practice to a metronome and goes into great, tremendous detail about how to practice and how to break down problems into smaller chunks. It's so clear to me that they're like, not a lot of them are not doing it when I make them like play a 4-measure thing, right? Like write a pattern and then at some point record themselves playing that in time with a metronome.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very eye-opening thing. So there's like lots of ways this recycles back into what we do in the traditional environment, and that's super helpful. But like it'll be usually the first step is to like write a short motif. That's usually what I'll have them do, and so they actually can just do that on paper. And then and that part is usually bite size enough that they usually are really into it. Like it's just the right amount of it. And then there's the recording part, which is a little bit of a lift. I have to like show the interface. Here's the other interesting thing is that we currently have one-to-one Chromebooks, but our school is piloting starting later this spring that we're not going to give them Chromebooks at home anymore. Like we're going to keep them all at school except for students who need them. And like families will be able to, for one reason or another, request that one stays with their student, for whether it's because they don't have access to something at home or because of something that's an accommodation that we're making for them. They have some sort of special need, but like the default position of our computers will be like mounted and inside of cabinets. So
interesting.
Yeah, and so that's and that's also not to mention that we're also losing access to all of our digital audio workstation tools due to restrictions from our district with like single sign-on, and we're very privacy centered in my district. Like, I mean, like I don't even know, like if this will be, because I can't think of anything that we're going to technically be allowed to use after those 2 changes happen that would allow it. But yes, they would be like doing the sound trap like recording at home. I do have some recording spaces in some storage closet practice room areas in the building that have some microphones in them that that's usually for when I have trouble with someone submitting an assignment, I'll have them use a space in the building. And then the editing is usually like there'll be some time in class for help, but then mostly at home.
Yeah. I think if I were to approach it, I would want to get a sense of what are they interested in, what are some of their goals, I think individually and as a group, and then to kind of float a couple of options to see, especially if the issue is like you need some buy-in, what are some different kinds of things we could do? Like here's a collection of different kinds of projects we could work on. One might be like building off of the music that they're working on. It's like here's the piece we're doing, and then you're creating a new arrangement or like a variation, a remix, something like that, where you're able to play the music that you like, but you're doing something with it in Soundtrap. That would be sort of like the closest to like what they're doing. If you're thinking of like sort of concentric circles out, I think a big like sort of design issue or like problem to think through would be, is there a way, what would it be like to have them engage in the ensemble with the tech and their instruments? And then the big issue to think through is like, how are we going to record when there's however many people are in your ensemble, and how do we even begin to think through that? And almost, what grades are you working with again?
6 through 8.
Yeah. And sort of like working with them to think through like how would we even shape this? Like, how would we work through this? This is an interesting design issue. How, do we take turns recording? Do we record at home? And kind of like opening up some of the decision making so it's like collaborative, where you have also sort of thought through plan A, B, C, D, and E in your back pocket that you can raise. But I think having them work collaboratively in sort of subgroups could be an interesting thing to think through. And then like if that's sort of like the kinds of projects that are closest to what they're doing, kind of stretching out of like, what would it mean to like create music that we could then perform, which is getting out of like a soundtrap kind of a thing and another kind of a thing where it's like, let's compose some pieces that we can actually create together. If there is like the tension in, but we want to be playing our instruments, which is what I'm hearing from you, is like trying to keep that a part of it so they're not too away from their instrument playing as they're doing their creative stuff with the technology. But then it might be maybe bringing in other kinds of technology that are not like like a music creation in terms of we're creating music in a platform, but more like what would it mean to like experiment with like effects processing and like changing sound and processing sound and things of that sort. I guess I'm always going to like Ableton Live to figure out like what could we do with Ableton, because that's sort of like my go-to for a lot of projects, which I know not all schools have access to that, especially if you're talking about Chromebooks and things of that sort. But what could it be like if we start experimenting with those kinds of things as well? So I think coming up with a variety of projects could be interesting. And then also I like to think in terms of thematic projects, where like it's not about the use of the technology, it's some other kind of project where you can explore whatever that project is through the technology. So like I had mentioned at one point, this Weight of Light project that we worked on at ASU, and this was the idea of trying to encourage young people to think about what it would be like if their community was 100% solar powered in the future. And in that case, the technology was just the means to like imagining that and then creating with that. And it was very much everyone sort of like in their own space in a big room, creating in small groups with computers after they had gone through a whole set of processes to think through what all of that was. And so it was like a longer term project, and they could share out at the end, these were our imagined solar futures. And it was sort of like a larger arc. And in that case, the teacher was doing that as sort of like the main thing. They weren't kind of pivoting back and forth, but I can imagine a scenario where you could pivot back and forth. Another teacher approached it really differently. They had a smaller class, and in this case, it wasn't an ensemble, and they had the whole class working together to create collaboratively. And I think they were using GarageBand in that case, of kind of imagining that. But I think, it's so contextual, because you have to know what makes sense to your students and what your students want, and then think about what's that sort of space where I'm encouraging them to try new things and to think differently, but it doesn't surpass the like, I don't want to do this anymore space, and kind of figuring out what that is.
It is, yeah, it's interesting. And it's tough because like the bigger the class size is, and the more, well, I think about this all the time. I mean, performing arts, we have so much infrastructure, and like that will set you free, and it will limit you at the same time. Like it's incredible that we can accomplish what we can accomplish, and that if I want to learn a new piece of music, I can go to one website and probably find everything and download it on my computer and send it to the printer in like 20 minutes, and then have it out in front of students. And I know that there's so many people writing for Young Band that write for the same 14 instruments. They voice the chords in really similar ways, and they have, if it says it's a medium easy, it's going to mean these kinds of skills have been learned already. And I just know that I can like put that in their hands, and that's going to be successful. And having all those logistics out of the way is honestly, when you're managing a program that's big, and when you're the only person in a huge room, that's huge. That's really, really huge. But then the second you want to do something a little different, you have to really lift. And that's the tough thing about these systems, is I think about it with regards to like school systems and their hiring. Like we have the different districts I've worked at in my state all have different kinds of structures, and some have more like kind of a baseline of like, okay, like there's this amount of band staffing at the school no matter what baseline, and that can be powerful in a school that maybe like has if that has a smaller program, but maybe there's like a need to have a full-time person there, maybe in order to support the students of that school's population. That's a really essential and important role, and that can be supported being there even if the program is really, really, really small. But then the second you need more, good luck. Like this is like kind of what we can offer. So there's like a kind of often a failure of imagination. So
I think, the imagination piece is huge. I think part of it, it's also a cultural thing, right? Like if you're trying to take away that students have been for a pretty significant period of time, and then say, now we're going to do this other thing, it's a cultural shift. Like this is not what a band does. This is different. And so there's like a cultural piece to that as well. And I think sometimes it takes multiple iterations of things to create a culture where, oh, this is a part of what we do. And then, what's interesting is you didn't raise the concert or concert cycle as a barrier to this, which is typically the thing I think that comes up in conversations of, I don't have time to do this because I have a concert coming up, but you didn't say that. So I'm curious about why that didn't come up for
I have
you.
a lot of thoughts on that. So actually, like my school until this year, we had some difficulty getting the necessary space to perform as often as we'd like to. But I'm a big believer in mastering the music more and then playing more often. And that means that the music repertoire has to be technically easier than like rather than having like okay, we're gonna take out. I mean, I know people who take out their assessment music in August and then there's to some degree or another like grinding on that until like March or April of the school year, and I just don't believe in that. Like to me, I do believe in the power of performing arts and in the concert, and that it's clean and precise and musical and expressive. But I think that like if the music is more accessible to the students, then they can really like meet all of those. That they can like master the music and sound like an ensemble and sound really, really good. So like I guess under program is my answer to this, and it's like so that's what's been able to help us play more often throughout the year, and so it's why also like I like something that I will hear from some because this is a time we have band assessment on Friday, so and then we have actually another one next Wednesday, so this is on my mind. But sometimes what I'll hear is like, oh my gosh, I'm really struggling to get my band together. Like we're falling apart. I can't imagine the music being like that, needing that much to be put into it this close to a performance. Like, but our music for this performance hasn't been falling apart in the past 2 months just because it's just like a little bit more in their grasp. So I don't know. I am not like precious about the rehearsal time. There's so many other things that need to happen. We have high school directors who are trying to connect with their students who come and visit a lot, and like. I try to be as accommodating to them as I possibly can. Like that's, where everyone's going. So they need the airtime. Come talk.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm not too concerned about that.
That's great. I mean, it feels like there's openness built into the way that you're running your program, which creates space for these kinds of things. I think I find it interesting that to go back to like curriculum for a second, of like when we think about goals of programs. I don't often see creativity listed as a goal. And I don't mean creativity just in terms of creating, but like creativity as part of the goal of X program is for students to be and feel creative in their and engage in creative musicianship. And I'm not saying that people are not thinking about it, but it's not often explicitly stated as a curricular goal. And I think when you think about what we spend our time doing, it's often like that rehearsal concert cycle that guides a lot of it. And I wonder if creativity was a stated goal, would there be more time and space dedicated to these kinds of things? I feel it's often at the periphery of a program, like an after the concert kind of a thing, or like if we have time for it kind of thing. And I love a speculative exercise where it's like, what would it be like if creativity was like the core? Not that it needs to be, but like as an exercise. What would it be like if creativity was the core? What would our rehearsals look like? What would the time that we're spending together look like? And with the caveat that your students want to play their instruments,
right?
How would that factor into that? And then what does that mean over like a period of years?
Something that I'm much more interested in doing, like asking how to integrate it into my band classroom. That is not technology or like composing. Like I would like improvisation to be like a core part of who we are and what we do. And it is absolutely not. I've started with the idea this year that I was going to work it more. And I was like, oh, this will help people be more comfortable joining the jazz band and soloing. And this will help us to listen better to each other. And I have a lot of things I need to work out with how to like manage it. But I started by just trying to put it in the warm-ups a little bit. I would like just having them like, okay, well, if we're going to all tune to like the same drone and like to get our instruments in tune, why don't we just like I have once, every day, like during that warm up, have each row, just everybody plays a one measure rhythm on that note instead of, holding it. And then we repeat it back to them or something like that, just trying to, and then, oh gosh, I can't remember the name because it's at school. It's an Oxford University Press book. It's about exactly this. The whole book is about short improvisation lessons that you can introduce into a performing arts environment. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'll put it in the show notes because I started with that this year and I was like trying my best and then I fell off. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm very, because they'll tell me, they're like, I can't improvise, and I'm like, what do you mean? You're doing that right now. And they're like, well, what? And I'm like, did you like know you were going to say that to me before you walked up to me just now, or before you walked into my house for your private lesson, or before you like past me on the way out the band room door, and they're like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, that's improvisation. We just need vocabulary. That's what we need.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, it seems like there's like an endless amount of different ways we could kick this around. I mean, this is like a core area of your research, right? And also, like, I mean, you're doing a lot with thinking about curriculum. And by the way, I've enjoyed the episodes of your podcast that I've been listening to. Well, I thought that, I mean, like, the very first episode it's just interesting. I was just like really resonating with a lot that y'all were talking about, because it is so often that I think the top Quaver as curriculum was one of the things that y'all sort of like dug your heels into a little bit. And I mean, yeah, it is. I do think that like technology is often kind of looked at wrongly as like sort of just like a plug and play kind of sequence of like what all the instruction is, without necessarily like sort of asking what's working, or like what, you know, the students need to be musically successful. And so like, in your opinion, like, what is curriculum, and what makes it successful, and why do we need it, and how often should it be reconsidered, and at what level of our institution
Oh my God.
I know.
So Robby, that's like a whole, yeah, I mean, I'll answer a little bit of that. Like, I'm writing a book on that, because I feel like the field is so awesome at like pedagogy and all, there's so many things that we do really well. And I feel like when we talk about curriculum, not everyone had the same amount of education in how to think about curriculum as they did with like conducting and teaching and, you know, choosing repertoire and things of this sort. So it's like this sort of open space for, like, as a thing that we can think through a lot more. And the word curriculum, you know, part of it is I'm doing this research project to understand, like, what are people, that's what those podcast, like right now, those podcast episodes are just straight up research interviews that I had, that I've been doing for a while. And we're sort of all over the map in terms of curriculum. So I'll just give a super quick overview that you can think of curriculum both as a noun and as a verb, which I think is an interesting thing to think through. And when you think about curriculum as a noun, there's so many different types. So there is sort of like curriculum as a sort of set of concepts. And there's also curriculum as an intended curriculum where it's like, I have this that I want students to learn. And sometimes a district has like an official curriculum that people have access to. Sometimes it doesn't. I find in a lot of districts or in a lot of rural schools, there is no set official curriculum. However, there's always a curriculum, because whenever you're making decisions and choices of what you would like students to be able to know and do, there is like an intended curriculum. There's also the planned curriculum, which is like what you're going to be doing from day to day. And these are sort of like all the curriculum as a noun. But then there's also there's the official curriculum that is there, let's say district-wide. Then there's your intended curriculum, which is like the stuff that you are going to interpret from the official curriculum and make happen. Then there's the planned curriculum that you're going to do from day to day. And then you get in that space with young people, and now that sort of intended curriculum, that planned curriculum, becomes what we might call the enacted curriculum, which is like sort of like the actual exchange of you and students with each other engaging together, and that is curriculum. And then there's also the embodied curriculum, what they take away from it. And sort of like outside of all of that, there's also the outside curriculum, which might be things that students are experiencing musically that are a part of their whole way of being in the world and their way of knowing, that may or may not be happening inside the school, but so let's say a student plays in some kind of ensemble, like a rock band outside of school, or maybe they play maybe they're in like a worship ensemble at a place of worship, and they have those sort of musical experiences, and then they're in school. Those might stay with them, even though it's not part of the school's curriculum. And that's a thing to think through as well. And then the biggest one is the null curriculum, which is all the stuff that we're not doing, because there's only so much we can do. And then there's the hidden curriculum, which is the stuff that students are learning and the stuff that we're teaching, but it's never made explicit. And this is like kind of the stuff, like the easiest one to call out is for years when we only included as a field music by white European men. And that's what students experience as a composer, either from posters on the wall or the music they engaged with. And then we're teaching them that like a composer is a white European man. No one says that out loud. It's not part of the official curriculum, but it's part of the hidden curriculum. So there's all these ways of thinking about what curriculum is that I think when we start to understand them and be able to work with them, we could think about what we're doing and why we're doing it in schools in really nuanced ways. And that's just like a tiny little slice of it. But I think that when we think about what the purpose of our program is, what the aims and goals of a program is, what our principles are, and what our goals are for students and what students' goals are for themselves, it helps us think more substantively about what's going on in our program. And there's so many different ways of thinking curricularly, of thinking with and through curriculum that I think can open up possibilities. That's why I'm most interested in it, is because I find that the field has evolved, certainly, but it's also stayed a lot of the same in so many ways. And that's even with many, many years of people providing other kinds of resources, other kinds of pedagogical approaches. There's still this sort of underlying glue that sort of holds things very similar over the years. And I have found that one of the things that can unlock that, and I don't want this to be taken as like to get rid of the stuff that we're doing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But to unlock additional possibilities is our ways of thinking with and through curriculum, because it can help us think about, oh, what else could this be? What else could I be doing? What else could we be spending our time with? And it's not something that we tend to talk a lot about in the field. So that's my interest in it. And I think I can't remember what other questions you asked. I just talked a lot.
That was what I was trying to get at. I mean, yeah. My minimal, we it's really easy for us, to think about like the document that's maintained. Which we do. I mean, my district has, we have like, in fact, I've been a part of our curriculum writing team for the general music side of things twice. We rewrite the curriculum a lot. We don't seem to be like having tools or not having tools because we have a particular kind of vision for what kinds of student experiences can be happening. If anything, it's the opposite. We're sort of just like scrapping together what we can with what we have, which is, to be honest, what everybody is doing, but also like not with a whole lot of foresight.
Yeah. So were you saying that there is a vision or there's not a vision?
I just think the vision, well, and part of it too is just how general music is positioned. Like, I don't know what your experience is with educators all over the country with regards to like what the curriculum there looks like, but I know that for every general music class I've ever taken or taught, it's a little bit of a grab bag. It doesn't have a real like core set of skills. It's typically not a population of students who are deeply curious about the subject. Mine have been traditionally very small classes at my current school. So it ends up being a little bit of class piano, a little bit of guitar, or in my case, ukulele, some music tech. We do have modern band, so we have and we work through I really like those Hal Leonard modern band books, and that has been a direction that I have noticed our district is going towards. Like, we have, we're piloting a program at one of our high schools. I think it's going to become an offering at every high school, and the general music experience does reflect a little bit of keyboard, bass, guitar, and we have a couple of digital drum sets in our classroom. And so we're playing songs that are, as recent as like 8 years old, which is honestly not bad. Like, I'm pretty good considering, some of the songs in the book are, a little older, but yeah, I mean, I think that and that's what's interesting too, is like, I grew up in all of these informal music making situations as a middle and a high school student. I was playing in heavy metal bands with my friends, not because I was signed up for it, because we have a lot of these like sign up experiences in my neighborhood where, it's just your Wednesday night activity. But no, like, because we wanted to play Metallica, my friends and I met at each other's homes, and then I was playing in the church band at the Methodist church. So like, I have all these experiences with like amateur music making and just like making music, just showing up just to play. Repeat throughout my experience, and with these popular music styles and like secondary like rhythm instruments, like these like guitar, bass, drums, keyboard. I'm playing them, and so for me, the modern band unit is not an ask. Like I'm like, okay, we're gonna open up to page 10. We're gonna play this. I had some some new teachers, general music teachers, coming to observe me, I guess because they were being brought around by our music leadership. And I was like, why do you want to watch me teach general music? And then I'm doing the modern band. They had so many questions. And they're just like, how did you think about this? How did you prepare this? How did you plan this? And I'm like, I just opened up to page 10 about Leonard. And they're like, but like, how did you decide to have so many pianos in this room? I'm like, well, we didn't. I had to go get them from all the other teachers in the county who didn't use them. Oh, how did you play the music? And I'm like, I plugged my computer in. Like, but there's all these sequencing steps that but for me it's just like subconscious intuition about this style of music that like it doesn't feel like a lift for me. So it's all of these other structural parts kind of stem from that. It's not, and then it looks like magic to someone who's never held a guitar before. So I don't know. I just went on a real long rant there. I didn't end up where I had started, but this is one of the ways where I feel like we are imagining what should we be doing that's maybe a little bit different.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. For me, I love ensembles. I love secondary general music. That's what I actually left instrumental music education for some years to teach specifically secondary general music because I felt much less constrained because of it was sort of limitless possibilities in terms of what we could do in those spaces. I think it very much ranges across the country of do they exist, what's happening in them. But to your point about vision, I think that's huge, right? Because I think we often start to develop curriculum, and sometimes it's like you were describing, like these sort of like units of kinds of like there is the piano unit, there's a guitar unit, there's a modern band unit, there are these like structures of time where they're doing things. We do tend to kind of focus on like doing that kind of thing before first asking, what are the larger aims and goals? What are students' aims and goals? This is not a critique, by the way, Robby. This is just kind of like a statement of like the aims and goals is sometimes missing from a lot of curriculum, and also asking students like, what are you into? What are you interested in? What would you like to do? What would you like to explore? It's funny. There was a kid in my neighborhood who happened to be drawing chalk outside a friend of my kids, and we were just talking about musical stuff. And I don't remember why. I think the whale came up for some reason. I was like, did you know that there's this person who plays the clarinet or has like done this in the past where he went out on a boat and like played the clarinet with whales and like made music with whales? Isn't that kind of cool? Like making music with nature. And she was like, yeah, that's really cool. But like that could become a thing of like there's so many possibilities of what these kinds of classes can be in terms of questions to think through, problems to solve, forms of musical practices that we can engage with. And, we were talking about music technology before. Like music technology can certainly open up some of those spaces, but we don't need music technology to like think of creative things that we could do in those courses. But there are less, I guess, traditional in the field, right, than the large ensembles.
Yeah. That makes sense. I didn't realize you were that specifically focused on secondary general music for a time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the undergrad class that I teach is called The Art of Teaching Contemporary Musicians, which is like how to help people think through the design and facilitation of classes that are not band, orchestra, and choir. And in Arizona, there's not a history. Like on the East Coast, I think there's much more history of them existing. I'm originally from New York, so I taught in New York. And there's much more history of those classes existing, whereas in Arizona, there's not really a history. They do exist from place to place, but it's not the majority model of like a lot of these existing. So I'm trying to help people think through like a thing that the last time they experienced general music would have been probably when they were in fifth grade, because it didn't exist in a secondary space. And a lot of it is project-based learning, thinking through, we do use a lot of technology in that class. Just the other day, we were actually looking through a couple of different examples of sort of lesson plans and project plans that people have put into various kinds of books just to think through the resources that exist. And then we just use it as a context to think through like teaching skills and things of that sort. But we're going to move into a project soon where we're we're going to be thinking through human and technological relationships and how are we going to be thinking through AI and what that means in music programs, and that will be our project-based learning that we do. And I think like that could easily work with, I work with a local producer named Truvan, and she often comes into our class and we'll do a thing like a typical project we've done in the past with her is she'll give us stems that she has from a piece that she's produced. And then all the students in the class will have access to those stems. We'll create music with the stems. Everyone has to add in something additional, and then we share them out. And then at the end, she shares, like, here's what my produced track is, and she takes us through her decision making. And so we'll probably do something like that. But I think we might be thinking through her perspectives on AI as well as a producer and someone who's looking to make get her music in with sync licenses and things of that sort, and kind of think through all the different angles. And secondary general music is a place where you can totally do those.
Well, I do
things.
appreciate how flexible our curriculum is, and even though that's, I would say, is like the most sequenced of, because we do also have performing arts curriculum, but at least where I am, I'll say like the general music curriculum is sequenced to the point where it is like in Canvas modules you can plug it in from a shared sandbox with all of our music teachers into your own, and like someone who's uncomfortable with the subject, who's like a choir teacher, who that's usually what it's paired with is choir, could just kind of go through each module in order, and they would, but that's, for me, I do appreciate the flexibility of being able to say like, okay, well, I'm going to do things in this order. I'm going to introduce this, like, I did grant money several years back for a bunch of those like little, the littleBits. So we do.
Oh, I just did a huge project with littleBits last year. Love those.
We have like a class set of these, which is cool. So there's like a lot of there's a lot of freedom, and so that's definitely what makes part of it, a creative and an engaging endeavor. Do you care if I bounce back to like research and writing tools?
Yeah, whatever you want. Let's go.
I mean, like you're dealing with so much writing. You're conducting interviews. You're reading lots. I know that you are a very interdisciplinary thinker. You're just trying to connect all of these things together. Are there apps, services, tools that you really depend on for organizing your thoughts and your data? What would you? We can go through many, or whatever ones you're most passionate about.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just going to go through like a workflow that's typical, and then just stop me whenever and ask questions. So a typical thing is like, I need to address such and such a concept. I'm in the middle of a research project, beginning a research project. I need, like what you mentioned, I'm reading a lot. And so my sort of initial step right now is to find the literature that I want to read, to make sense of it. I'm going to Google Scholar. I'm going to the ASU library database. And then I'm also using Scite.ai. That's SCITE.ai. And I have an account with that. And that I find really useful for, it will kind of scan out across databases. And I could either use it like a Google Scholar type search where it's like, I want to find, give me cultural reproduction and curriculum and music education, like how I might in a Google Scholar, and I'll go and find things like Google Scholar will. But what it does that Google Scholar doesn't do as well is where Google Scholar gives you, here's 3,000 things that I think, I don't want to personalize Google Scholar, but like here's 3,000 articles that you could read. Scite.ai will say, here's 3,000, and then I'm going to show you sort of into the PDF file the 2 or 3 places where what you're looking for is possibly most relevant, which saves a lot of time in terms of decision making of what to download and what to scan. So I use it in that way. And then you can also, in a similar form as like a GPT, you can ask it a question. What are the ways that people have thought through cultural reproduction in secondary education settings? And then it will give you like a 4 to 5 paragraph synthesis that answers the question. But then on the right-hand side, it's going to cite all the articles it's drawing from. So I'll read through that synthesis, but the synthesis is not so much what I care about. It's that it's going to help me find the most relevant articles as a starting point. And then from there, it's a matter of accessing all those PDF files, downloading them, and then repeating that similar process of, is this relevant? I'm going to skim through it, scan through it. Is this worth reading? And then finding more articles. It's like it's a massive process of finding, making sense of what's worth reading. And one of the things that helps me I have realized recently that a lot of people don't do file management anymore. And I've been talking about file management in a lot of my classes. For me, it's critical to have good file management. So I run Hazel in my downloads folder for the simple task of anytime a PDF file goes into my downloads folder, Hazel will throw it into a PDF folder within my downloads folder, which just makes it easier to get all that stuff. And then I'm taking all that stuff that I say, this is worth reading now, and I'm putting it into DevonThink Pro, which is a massive database of all my PDF files. And that's like everything that I ever want to read is in there from forever. It's like folders and folders and folders and folders of PDF files that are all categorized. But the nice thing about that is, let's say I have an article, and I'm like, right now I'm focusing on curriculum as cultural reproduction, and it goes into the cultural reproduction folder. You can make a replicant, which is basically an exact copy. It's not only a duplicate, because I can take that replicant and stick it into another folder. Let's say the other folder is on sociology and music education. So I'll throw it in there, and then anything that I'm highlighting or annotating in one is synced with the other, no matter where it appears.
Do that again.
So
okay, so DevonThink, your PDFs are in DevonThink.
So,
you got a folder structure of art. Do you organize them in any way? Do you?
Oh yeah,
okay.
It's all
thematized. And you're doing that manually.
And it's like, oh yep, yeah. I have like because this process is often helping me think through a topic. So like I have a curriculum folder right now, because that's where my head is at most of the time. And in that is like how to structure and organize curriculum. And then in that is orientations to curriculum. And then in that is cultural reproduction. And then in that are a bunch of PDF files. And so one of the issues that people have with folder structures is that you have to choose where it goes. And actually, that process of figuring out where am I going to put this PDF file is a lot of cognitive load, right? So like when I'm reading a lot of things and they're in like the downloaded folder and I'm trying to figure out where it goes, the placement of it is a whole task in and of itself. That's going to, like, if I don't have the like headspace for it, I might just leave it until I can put it in the right spot. So once I put it in cultural reproduction, I might say to myself, well, this also relates to sociology. This is like coming from a sociological perspective, and I want it to also be there. Well, in a lot of folder structures of PDFs, you would have to make a duplicate, and now you would have two versions of that file. And if I'm highlighting it in the cultural reproduction folder, what happens to the version of it that's in the sociology folder? So what DevonThink allows me to do is it creates a synced version.
Like,
it's almost like they are aliases, but they're in two places at the same time. So that's critical.
Are you on their new version
of DevonThink?
Yeah.
I think so. I usually try to keep the most updated version of it. Because
they have some like AI stuff baked into it that sounds like it might, I don't know.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is like I don't use AI to categorize things, but I will use I love its search capacity to help me find things, because it's doing two things. It's one, it's reading into the PDF, so it's finding all the instances that have a word that I'm looking for. So if I'm going to look for cultural reproduction, it will go through many PDFs and find all the ones that have the word cultural reproduction, and then it has always been using some form of language model that I don't understand to find, I think this is most relevant, before anyone was talking about AI, at least in the mainstream. And then it will also find things that it thinks are relevant. So it's when you have lots and lots of PDF files and you've been working with them for years, DevonThink is a nice way to kind of find all the relevant ones if they're not in your folder structure. And you can also tag them. I will sometimes tag the PDFs. And then you can also have it create smart folders where it's going to grab all the things related to a particular search. So I'm not using the AI so much to like help me understand the PDF file, but it's part of like the search process of finding things.
Yeah. DevonThink has been, so I have it and I use it for a couple of things, but it was one of the, I kind of wanted to use it as an everything bucket, and it a little bit doesn't want to be that. But when for people who have very specific focused ways of using it, like what you're describing, it seems to be very, very, very powerful.
Oh yeah, it's super powerful. It's expensive, and I think when I'm working with grad students, I tell them to start with Zotero because it's free and it has a similar kind of thing where you can put your PDF files in there. But I also have my entire, I'll get into like Obsidian stuff in a minute, but my vault is synced into DevonThink. So when I'm searching in DevonThink for something, it will also surface any markdown file that's in Obsidian. So I'm doing a lot of searching and connecting and finding, and then DevonThink is like a power tool for that helps me keep track of all the PDF files and help me find what I need when I need it. And then I'm usually when I'm reading from DevonThink, I'll hit it's a button with an arrow that like pops it out of DevonThink, and now it's in PDF Expert, and that's where I'm going to do my highlighting and reading through and making sense of things. And the highlighting process for me is not always the same day that I'm downloading stuff. So because it's different kinds of cognitive load. And so often I'm like, find, organize. And then another day it's read, intensive reading, highlighting. And then I'm color coding in DevonThink. Okay, I've read this and I've highlighted it and I have that. And then after that, it's going into Obsidian. Sometimes I'm grabbing pieces of it, like I often sometimes use Text Sniper.
Oh yeah,
I don't know
I've heard
if
that
you've
one
ever
in a
used
while.
that. It's like yeah, because sometimes there's like stuff like Devon it'll do the OCR recognition really well, but sometimes things get really wonky and they just won't. The OCR won't work. So I'll text sniper stuff from like other things and grab that into Obsidian. But like it's usually going into DevonThink, and then from DevonThink, and then I'm starting to work with it once I've highlighted it up in Obsidian, and that's where I do the bulk of my work. So anything that's for me like this is something that I need to work with. I have it open with PDF Expert over here, and it's highlighted, and then in Obsidian, I'm taking notes on that, and I call it a lit note, and I'm often grabbing word for word verbatim, copying and pasting chunks that I've highlighted into Obsidian in this lit note, and then I'm creating headers that sort of thematize the big concepts. And that is both a way of making meaning of the article and keeping track of it so that I don't always have to go back to the PDF file in Devon. Once it's in my Obsidian folder as a lit note, it's there forever, and I can use it in lots of different ways. And then at some point, I'm going to take that lit note and I'm going to take the concept, like the header concepts, I'm going to make a concept-based note. So let's say there's an article and it only on page 12 is it talking about cultural reproduction in this particular way. In my lit note, I'll have all the other stuff it's talking about along with the cultural reproduction, but I want a note that's just on cultural reproduction. So now I have all my lit notes from everything that I've read and all the different ways that those are talking about cultural reproduction, and there's one big cultural reproduction note with lots of headers of all the various ideas related to that. And that might break off into smaller concept-based notes, more focused ones, but it's living in my Obsidian for me to access anytime I want to think about cultural reproduction. I just Command F, it's going to go to OmniSearch, and it's going to pull up my cultural reproduction file. And then when I'm in the middle of class and I need my notes on cultural reproduction, at my fingertips. When I'm in the middle of class and I've assigned like a reading, I can pull up my lit note and it's right there. So I have my PDF with the highlights and I have my lit note. And then I have, I'll get into it a little bit later, like my Obsidian with the I use Obsidian for teaching too. And so once I have my lit note and my concept-based note, it's at that point where I'm starting to get into my writing, and I'm writing in Obsidian too. Now, I used to write in Google Docs, and I try to avoid Word and Pages and not deal with them until the very, very end. Now I'm writing everything in Obsidian, and I'm finding it to be really, really helpful because I have all my notes and ideas that I can interconnect so easily with like all the ways to like link across things and even embed notes sometimes. So my it's sort of like my whole research process, and this is all just the literature, is happening in Obsidian. So that's one big piece of things. With the surveys and interviews, that is also like I need tools, I need systems, or else it would be just very unwieldy.
No, this is great. I'll stop you if I want to. I mean, I'm just learning about all these tools. This is the thing that excites me, and that I also seems like overwhelming about what you do. But I think that these kinds of workflows are useful to teachers because what you're describing, these are not just apps that I mean, I'm sure you kind of probably have to use them if you're managing this volume of research. Yeah. But I will say to anyone listening who's just like in the classroom, this stuff is so useful for me. I just booted up my Devon Think, which I haven't opened in a few days, while you were saying this, and I'm thinking about all the useful stuff that I can do in here, from just like archiving a history of my RSS feed on my blog, all the way to dragging email confirmations of parents who wants pizza for the upcoming field trip, to like, I'm just like looking in here, like board game instruction manuals, new car research, like finances, and I don't have the new version, so I don't know, but some of the AI search stuff seems like it might be interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, let me just riff on that real quick, because I can imagine, like, let's say you're going to work on a piece in your ensemble and you want to use like a comprehensive musician through performance model. So you're doing like a lot of research about the piece. It would be a very similar process. Oh, here's all the stuff that I've read. Here's like people's analysis. I can like screen grab all that stuff, stick in a thing, and then use Obsidian to like pull it all together and synthesize, and then it's right there. So it's like the research process is actually, there's a lot of parallels in planning processes, I think. But yeah, let me get into the surveys, because that's a whole thing, and the interviews. All right, so for survey, for this particular project I've been working on, very large national survey, I'm using Qualtrics because I need the granularity and the control more than like a Google form would not work for me for this kind of research. So in Qualtrics, everything goes in there, and it has lots of branching questions. Like, so if someone is an administrator, they're going to get additional sets of questions that other people wouldn't get, and it does a lot of this stuff. And then I am exporting each individual survey as a PDF file and then sticking that into Obsidian. And at that point, no one's name. So everything, the survey is all anonymized. So I don't really know who anyone is unless they opt into, at the very bottom of the survey was a question like, would you like to engage in a follow-up conversation? Would you be interested in reviewing any resources that I create? And if so, then I would need their email addresses and their names. But that lives in Qualtrics. In my Obsidian, there's no names of anyone. There's just numbers. Like, this is this record from this PDF file. So I have, for every single survey response, there's a dedicated Obsidian file that has the PDF file of their survey responses. And then it also has a copy and paste of the text of the survey. And that's important for the way that I use Obsidian for the analysis. So I have now this file of like, here's how this person answered all these questions. Then I create, for each question of the survey is an Obsidian file. So let's say the question is, going back to what we were talking about before, what is curriculum? And so every person's answer to what is curriculum is in that file. It's like very, very, like this massively long file. And from there, what I was doing is I was grabbing each of those responses and putting them in Obsidian's Canvas. I think Canvas is like an underused aspect of Obsidian, which for whenever you're doing, I'm working with like massive amounts of data and I need to make sense of it. And working at it with just a text form with headers would just be, I wouldn't be able to do that as well as when I can lay it all out visually. And so what I was doing is I was clustering these similar response. Oh, here's all these people that are talking about curriculum. This is what I think curriculum is. I think curriculum is the stuff that we teach. I think curriculum is the benchmarks that we have. I think curriculum is a document. I think curriculum is a resource. And I can create all these visual, like these clusters of responses that are visual. And then at any point I could click on one of those responses and it takes me back to the file that has all the responses in it. And each of those has a link to the original person's file. And the reason why that is important is because let's say I see a whole bunch of clusters around a particular way of thinking about curriculum, like, okay, let me see, who are these people? And then I realized, oh, all these people teach music technology classes. That's interesting. But if I didn't have the link back, they would have just been like not
Yeah.
disconnected from the person who responded. So Obsidian allows me to interlink everything. And so once I have that massive visualization of all the responses, then what I'm doing is I'm creating theme-based files in Obsidian. So now I have like, here's all the people who talk about curriculum as a resource, and that's this kind of theme, curriculum as a resource. And so I have tons and tons and tons of those kinds of files. And now I have all the different kinds of survey responses thematized, ready to go in these files that I could link to at any point. And they also show up in search. So let's say I'm in the middle of an interview later on in the study, and someone's talking about curriculum as a method book. And I'm like, oh, this is curriculum as a resource. I just do Command F, curriculum as a resource. All of a sudden that file pops up and I can link it. And I can put this person's response into that file. So now I can have anything that has the file that says curriculum as a resource. It originally started as all survey data, and now I can put interview data in there as well. And so it's just getting more and more rich of data. And all this data is at my fingertips. So that's a little bit of how Obsidian is working with the survey responses. The interviews involves a lot more project management kinds of things. So at the front end was Calendly for people to like schedule an interview with me. And the Calendly is, I know there are lots of things that do this. For me, it was Calendly, but like I need something that integrates with my calendar, because to figure out like how to manage all these interviews with all these folks and my schedule would just be sort of a nightmare. So it just knows like I have these available slots, fill them in whenever people have available, and they can link to that. And then I'm using lots of email back and forth, and I could tell you I probably saved days and weeks due to Text Expander and Keyboard Maestro, because I did not have to ever type out an email. Like I had all these templates that had just fill-ins that saved me so much time. And with Keyboard Maestro, I would use the palette. There's like the menu palette option, and each menu palette would be like a set of other additional Keyboard Maestro macros where the palette might be, I do like -C stud. And when I do that, it gives me a palette of like, is this an introductory email? Is this an email after an interview? Is this like a group interview? Is this like a something after the podcast? And then I click on that, and then when it eventually drills down, it creates the last macro is the text expander, and then it just makes the text expander. So like literally, like I'm writing all these emails, all I'm doing is like -C stud, person's name, link, done, and then it's like boom, 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 and I can fire them off. Otherwise, it would be like hours, and I would just hate myself. So those management tools are
I regret
huge.
to tell you that I do. Have you used Fantastical at all? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
So I'm assuming you do like pay for their subscription thing?
I can't remember if I had the premium or not, but I think
it has a
they have
very,
a
very
Calendly,
nice
right, or something.
Calendly thing that you can like set up on the web. I think it still works. It takes you to the web, and you set up like I have one called a 30, a 45, and a 60-minute private lesson makeup. So like I schedule everything by text with my family's. But if somebody needs a makeup and it's like I owe them a lesson, I have like these 3 links that I've generated where I go on the website and I'm like, okay, so basically here's the thing. It's like, all right, you're going to look, I'm willing to teach a private lesson between these hours on these days. Look at these calendars that I have plugged into my Fantastical in order to determine when my free time is. You don't offer lessons, without a 15-minute buffer on either end of you set up a bunch of stuff, and then it gives you a URL, and I can paste that URL into a text message with a family, and I can say, go for it. And then what it does is it just takes them to a website, but then when they choose a time, it just shows up in the calendar I've told it to inside of Fantastical, like in the app, and I'm like, this is really, really nice. And I already used the thing. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. I like it quite a bit. It's tough to recommend, but to people pay so much for a calendar app. But if knowing you're using DevonThink, I don't think you'd have any problem. I mean, it's really become quite useful for me. So
yeah, I love that. I'll definitely look into that because I do like Fantastical.
I mean, these are all automation tools too. Some of them that I I just really recommend. Like, I think like one of my uses, I just use Text Expander today to fire off. I've got just like a template for telling a parent that their child missed their sectional, because that's like, speaking of curriculum, I mean, like there's graded assessments inside of every sectional, but it is a pull-out program at our school. So like they're missing another class up to 2 times per quarter, and they have to remember to come. And so I have some stuff in place that helps me to help them to, remember to come. But at the end of the day, it's like, there's a little bit of responsibility that's on them. And so when they miss it, I want the family to know, hey, that like you're going to see the grade change, and here's like all the stuff that we can do to kind of get them back on track. And also like, here's some recommendations for remembering to come to these. And that's like just it's important that email is detailed, but also like, I just don't want to think about it. I just want to address it too. So, right. I mean, I just have a Canvas inbox, and I just really quickly type in the names, if any, of anyone missing, and I just type missed sectional with no space in between, and then it, fills it all out. And I've got tons of things like that, all just hanging around in Text Expander. It's awesome. Keyboard Maestro is so great too. I mean, you can like, I have a workflow that runs a shortcut when I plug my computer into the like station at the front of the band room, and it's like a shortcut that I run that like opens and starts my keynote presentation, and it like closes all of my personal apps so that they don't project onto the screen of my class. Like, I don't want iMessage running in the background. It opens certain apps, closes certain apps. It opens some website. It opens all my grade books for all my different classes in a tab, and it does all this. I can just run the shortcut manually, but like Keyboard Maestro can recognize the USB hub that we have at the front of our classroom, and so when I plug into it, Keyboard Maestro recognizes that as a trigger and just like immediately starts popping off all sorts of stuff, which is really great. And for simple stuff too. Like the other day, I was just wondering. I was like, I should have a keyboard shortcut to get to each of my classes' grade books. Like, that would be convenient. And I was like, there's like a million ways I can do this on my computer, but Keyboard Maestro was just the easiest way to set it up. I just set up a hotkey, type in a keyboard shortcut, and then added the action, take me to URL, and now I have keyboard shortcuts to. Option Command 1 is Wind Ensemble. Option Command 2 is Concert Band. Option Command 3 is General Music. So,
I think it's I tell people when they're like, that seems like a lot to think through that. It's like, well, if you do it at the front end, you're saving yourself all this time, and if you're doing a lot of context shifting and you're in the middle of things, and you could just have these things at your fingertips, it actually is worth the time to like create them. Right.
And I'm starting to get into a little bit with some of the. Have you done much with Claude?
No, I pretty much stick to, for AI, I stick to like what the university provides, because it's all walled in and FERPA compliant and all that. So
what I've been curious about is like, and I have like super mixed feelings about these chatbot things, like the generative aspect of them aside, just looking at like. Them to me, the best possible outcome is that these like become the basis of like a new generation of automation tools for computers, because it's so clear that they can be that. But like my sectional schedule is like, I make it in all like native tools that I and then what I do is I copy it as a markdown table to a website that is visible to our students. But it's like a lot of work. Like it takes sometimes like hours to get that thing built every quarter. And I spent some time telling the robot the rules, how sectional. It's like, all right, these are the periods I can pull from. These are how many periods in the day there are. I've got Mondays, I can't be pulled from fourth period. Everybody needs to have as many of these as possibly can fit in the schedule per quarter. These are, no half days. I don't want pulling on a half day. I don't want to teach more than 2 a day. And it was a little bit of back and forth, but I have created a little robot that can actually do. At one point, even too, I was like, you got to check these things. I'm checking it, and I'm like, I think it put the concert band flutes more than twice per quarter in period 3, and I told it, and it was like, I think you're wrong, actually. And then I double checked myself, and I was like, you're right. So I mean, like, but again, it was like I did feel like I was poking at it a little bit, and the indeterministic nature of these things makes me feel really different about them than, say, like writing my own automation, which in theory will work every time I click it in the same way. But there's like I don't know. I think there's like a little bit of it too, where it's like, okay, well, now ideally we'll find out next quarter. Can I say, okay, do this again, and then it's just gonna kind of like pop off. I mean, that's the. that's kind of the idea behind these things. Like my shortcut took, I don't know, like 15 minutes to build, but like those 3 minutes that are the first 3 minutes of class are some of the most chaotic minutes of some band, choir, orchestra directors' lives. Like there's just tons of needs coming in all at once. There's high traffic. There's instruments being moved around, and you're just like trying to set up your computer. And why just be fiddling around with all of your apps when you can just plug it in and watch it all happen? Like that's a huge thing for me.
Right. Yep.
I didn't mention it also triggers all my devices into a focus mode, and then the focus mode trigger on each of my devices runs a shortcut on those devices, which also does stuff like my iPad opens up Fourscore and a seating chart and a lesson plan. I've kind of moved to Craft from Obsidian just because I'm doing a lot of other stuff in there. Like that's where I make stuff. It's kind of become my like Google Docs, unless I have to use Google Docs. If I just want to make some information and have it be on the web, like I'll typically put it there unless I really want to own and control the visual appeal of it or have it associated more firmly with my website's brand. Like I'll put it in Craft. And so like we have, in fact, we have some stuff that we've built that's like stuff for students to see, like just from like our handbook. Like a lot of this stuff used to be on our website, and we're like, well, it's so clunky to have this be on a website. Why don't we just build this in an app that works just as easily as like a note app does? And so we can put that there. That's my one thing with Obsidian is I really wish that they would, with either their, I guess it would make more sense as part of, I don't know if it would make more sense as part of their sync or their publish subscription. I guess publish, but like they don't really have any way to just stick a note on the web. Like you kind of have to take a network of stuff. It's got that very databasey kind of, and that's just not what I'm trying to do with one of those tools. Like I want to be able to make like all these disparate little bits of data, and then like kind of each thing has an on and off switch. I can say like, okay, oh well, this thing needs to be shared with this person, so let's share that, put that on, that's on the web, and then here's a link. I mean, I guess like for our handbook we could have that, but I don't want to have a whole database just for our handbook. Like that seems really cumbersome.
Right.
But what I have done in Obsidian, which is super useful, is it's a great way for managing and wrangling text files, and I always have use for text files. So I still use it quite a bit. And one of my things that I've been trying to think about how to do more meaningfully is kind of keep like a local copy of all of my most frequent Canvas stuff in a directory of text files. So like, because like I don't even do the thing where I import my old data, like changing around all the dates and stuff, because sometimes the dates don't carry over right. All the little tweaky stuff you have to do, and waiting for every click to go to the internet and load is just such a pain. I have just some text files of like Canvas messages that I send for certain events every year the same, and like projects that I usually give every year, and assignment description pages and stuff. And Obsidian is so great because it's written in Electron. It can like parse out. It's got all that web stuff under the hood. Like it can like parse out the HTML, so I can actually just put HTML in Obsidian, and it reads beautifully to me in Obsidian, and then I can just copy and paste it into a Canvas thing, and that looks really beautiful to everyone else. Oh, interviews. Yes.
Oh, interviews. All right. So with interviews, once we're actually doing the interview, that's done Zoom just like this. And what I'm doing is I have the person's survey responses. I create a file for their interview, also in Obsidian, and then I have basically a template of questions, but I'm also customizing the questions based on their survey responses. So each person has their own individual Obsidian interview file that I'm using while I'm interviewing with them. I don't often, because I'm recording it, I'm often not taking notes unless they say something I want to come back to. So it's really mostly there so that I can ask the questions and kind of skip around as I need. And then once that Zoom recording is done, I grab it from Zoom Cloud, stick it into Dropbox so it's like there for good, and then I'm grabbing a copy and putting it into Descript. And have you used Descript at all?
Until I had an editor for the show, I was doing the whole show in there. Yeah.
With Descript, yeah. It's I love it, and I use it as a research tool. And so what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the transcription, so I have multiple Descript projects, and it gets very bloated. I've noticed, like if I have too many files in one project, it'll start really slowing down. So I've kind of chopped them up into like sets. But what I'll do is I'll have the Descript, each person's interview file is in Descript. So I have the transcript, and then I'm usually editing out the ums and things of that sort. But that's also an opportunity to listen through the whole interview. So it's like working with that data. And then I'm exporting a transcript out to a Google Doc where I will share it with the participant so that they can look at it. And if they want to make any edits, if they want to say, like, please don't include this in the project, or they want to add any additional information, they have the opportunity to do that in the Google Doc. And then I'm sometimes engaging with the video data using the sort of like, what is it? It's like copy and paste into a composition, you know? And so I can create, just how I have thematized Obsidian files, I can create thematized compositions. So imagine like all the times that someone talked about curriculum as method books or resources, I can have a Descript composition that's all of those clips. And I just love that I can grab the text and have the video come. I mean, that's a huge, huge tool. And the transcription, it's so ubiquitous now, transcription. But like, I've been at ASU for 18 years, and it wasn't too long ago where I was having to transcribe files with typing text out, and having students in my qualitative research class do it too, and them saying like, this takes too long. And I'm like, I know it does. But like now that I can, and I used to say like, I don't think I will ever have anything transcribed because it's about working with that data. But like, it just saves so much time, and then I can watch it and listen to it at the same time, and it's fabulous. So Descript is a huge tool
for those who don't know. Descript is the one where you give it an audio or a video file, and it like literally presents it to you like a Word file, and then you like delete the word out of the transcript, and it just deletes that part of the audio.
Yeah, and then you can search for like where did someone talk about this thing? It finds it right in the text, and you have the video right there, because when you highlight it, it's linked to the video, which is huge. So then once I have that Descript file and the transcript, I do most of my I go back into Obsidian, and I'm pasting the transcript in Obsidian. So now that person at the bottom of their interview file, I now paste the transcript. And there I'm doing similar to what that process was that I described earlier with like lit note, concept-based note. What I'm doing is I'm looking through the interview and I'm thematizing what they're talking about. And I'm saying, this is related to curriculum as a resource. This is related to something related to a scope and sequence. This is related to whatever. And I have all these headers in their interview. And then I can copy and paste or embed. It depends on what I'm doing. And also, I have a plugin in the Obsidian that lets me grab something and then stick it into somewhere else, and it links back to that exact spot in the original file.
Which one is that?
So I'm using any...
I would love to know.
Ooh, I don't even remember. Let me see. When I highlight it and I right-click, it's whole lines from another file as block embeds, and I can't remember what the plugin. It doesn't tell me what the plugin.
I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah,
I'll try to figure
it out.
For those
who just to touch on Obsidian too, like one of the things that's cool about it is that it is, for anyone looking to get into it, to me it's like kind of like if you can imagine your note-taking app having like just a whole bunch of like user-created free plugins, much like your digital audio workstation might have like an equalizing plugin that maybe you can like buy a third-party de-esser from someone, and then you can like get all the S sounds out of your audio recording inside of Logic Pro or Ableton. Like the user community makes additional tools for Obsidian that you can just download right inside of the app, and then it just changes the way that the app behaves. And there's like just so many cool little things like that. I'm looking for one. So if you embed a note in another note, which is the thing you can do, is you can have like the contents of one note show up inside of another note. Is there a plugin that allows you to edit the note that's inside of the note? Because I've been looking.
I think there is. I don't want to say yes, but I think there is. I use the hover I think you can actually hover in there and edit. I don't even know if you need a plugin. I've downloaded so many plugins that I forget which ones are native and which ones are like, because I have a plugin that lets me do this. But yeah, I definitely use the embed a note or an embed where you can embed and then put the hash, the like number sign, and then it lets you control which header you're embedding, so you can just kind of have only a partial part of a note. But yeah, I'm doing all that analysis and then going back and forth between analysis and writing in Obsidian. So Obsidian is a huge part of both the management and the work of the research project, because everything is in there. And what it becomes really powerful is at any given point you can link to anything. So you could link to other data from other participants. You could link to writing. You could link to like something from a research file. And then this is kind of funny that this happens sometimes. So I listen to podcasts using the Snipped app. And I'm assuming it's snipped and not sniped, but it's like SNIPD. And one of the reasons I like that is when you're listening, you can click your AirPod, and if you click twice, it marks that part in the podcast, and then it uses the AI transcription, and then I have it set up so that it brings it into Obsidian in its own dedicated file. So sometimes when I'm in the middle of writing, and I listen to a lot of music ed podcasts, I'll be writing and I'll be like, what do I have on such and such a concept? And it'll sometimes find like a podcast episode in a moment in a podcast episode where it's a good example of a thing that I'm writing about. So then I can link that in there too and be like, oh, so eventually I could say, hey, listen to this moment in this podcast for an example of this person talking about this idea. So that's the interlinking of everything is huge and just kind of makes you're constantly finding connections. So that's a lot of stuff happening in Obsidian. To manage all of this, I'm also using Airtable, because imagine like, so many different interviews with people. Well, you don't need to imagine because you do that. But like, I have all these. I have a massive Airtable database with all these different participants and the status and the links to the files, and so that helps me keep track of like where all the people are in the project and how I'm working through that. So that's how I'm keeping sort of like the big zoomed out overview of things. That's sort of like a lot of the research process.
Have you gotten into Notion at all?
Yeah. So I've used it in a couple of ways. Sometimes I'll do consulting work, and I either will use, sometimes instead of using a Google Doc for everything, I've used a Notion database. And I have found that it's, for people who don't use it regularly, it can feel like a lot. And I've also, at one semester, I tried having some classes build out some Notion. I don't know, what do you call it, a database? What's a Notion? Like a Notion thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was thinking about this the other day. So like you've got Vaults in Obsidian, you've got Workspaces in Craft. I think they're databases in Notion. I think so.
Yeah. I had a class. I was very excited. Like, let's build that. And they're like, another tool. So I just haven't used it as much. But to your point about Obsidian earlier, in terms of making things shareable, Notion is great for collaborative work and has similar things to what Obsidian has. But I have tended to not use it as much unless it's like a specific project where I really need those kinds of moving across multiple parts of the database and different pieces, where if Obsidian allowed me to do that in a very easy way, I would probably use Obsidian. But it's like a tool that I have available if I needed to use it.
Yeah, for everything that's a document in my life that doesn't need to look pretty, I'm learning that like I'm wondering if in the next couple of years I'm going to need to redo a lot of my work in a tool where maybe it doesn't like look as nice and identifiable, but where all of the data is more like an interconnected block. And to me, like, I know Obsidian and Craft are trying to add some of this databasey stuff, but Notion is the best at all of them at being a super rock solid and reliable. Like it's essentially like what FileMaker used to be for some people. And just to give you some FileMaker history, like I our music team for I don't know, maybe this is a conversation for another day, but we have like this whole like music mastery sequence that we've collaborated on, which is just like a sequence of all of the songs that the students play for us in the sectionals. And there was a time where we were using FileMaker to track their progress, like to take performance assessment records. And the orchestra teacher at our school was paying a consultant like hundreds of dollars to like consult him on how to write the scripts to make this relational database of student records and song records, and then like another database of instances of students performing these songs into it, and just like stitching that all together. And you can like just actually ask Claude to do that in your Notion now. Like you can just say like, you know, like make me all, you can just describe it to it and it'll do it. And so I'm thinking to myself like, okay, in a world where maybe like a looser syntax but still like written and spoken text can be used to automate more work. Do I want my work to be living in a place like I was just thinking about it the other day? It's like one thing I don't really have a great system for. I have a system for it, but it's like a little cumbersome. It's like remembering when I last performed repertoire, and there's absolutely no reason. I have a spreadsheet of my rep. I have all sorts of documents all on my computer about concerts. I have concert programs. Like there's no reason why I shouldn't just tell the robot to make me a Notion database, like basically put my music library in a Notion database, and then say, okay, great, I need you to create a relational database for me now, where every time I have a concert, I log the music I play, and then you remember it. Done. And then I just ask you. And then...
Yeah. Two things on that. One, I guess when I need deep powered relational databasing, I'm using Airtable. That's my go-to. But Obsidian does have
bases. Do you
bases,
use those a lot?
And I do. I use them a lot, and the more that I use them, the more I see how powerful they are. And the thing for me is, if I want to avoid, we were talking about this with the social media thing a bit too, right? I want to avoid having my data in some proprietary commercial thing. And with Obsidian, it's all markdown files. And so I have had experiences in the past where I had older versions of a software. So I used to do a lot of my qualitative analysis in a program called Hyper Research. And it's like a go-to. A lot of people use this, and there's Atlas. There's like multiple of these qualitative research analysis tools. Well, everything in there was proprietary. So at one point, I had a project from a long time ago, and I wasn't looking at it for a while. I wanted to open it up later on, and it was like broke. I couldn't access it. And I've had multiple experiences like that where something is in a proprietary form, and I worry about accessing it. And with Obsidian, I know like the Kipano, the guy who's the head of Obsidian, is constantly talking about like the importance of files. And I really I'm very comforted knowing that if some plugin breaks, if a plugin, like I use a plugin called Projects, and I just realized the other day that it's discontinued, so it's no longer being. And I had like a minor freak out moment where I was like, oh, I'm using this for the book I'm working on. I have so much in here. And now it's like, it's going to probably reach a point where it will no longer work. And then right after I was like, oh, but they're all markdown files. I'll just figure out another way to use all that markdown files. And it was like, whew. But like with Notion, first of all, it's in the cloud, right? I'm not comfortable with that. Also, it's like, it's their thing. It's Notion's thing. So I have used it, but like, I'm comforted by the idea that it's all markdown files with Obsidian, and then the bases, I can figure out how to build them as I'm going and make them work in a similar way to Notion. And then if I need the relational database, like really deep interconnections, and I'll just use Airtable for that. So, but then Airtable is the same situation as Notion, right? It's like your stuff is in a proprietary cloud-based thing that you don't have control over. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely an increasing thing. I'm curious to get into it with Obsidian. Might be the place that I want to do it, because the kind of work I'm thinking of is like just the personal productivity that I'm doing on my computer. Like it's just things that like information basically that I need to have. The idea of using like a million of these things is a little frightening. Like it would be cool if it could be consolidated. So while on the one hand, it'd be cool to use a thing like Notion, because then maybe it could eventually just be like replacing what I'm doing with Craft, because Notion does let you just put stuff online, which is a thing that is useful about Craft.
Right.
But also I do believe in using things for what they're good at and having more little tiny tools rather than being all in on one thing. I mean, I don't really think the everything app is I think you get some benefits from being in an ecosystem. Like I think people who like put everything in Google Docs, like there's some stuff you can benefit from if you do that, but to me it does not outweigh all my issues with Google, even just from like the productivity issues of just like how cumbersome I find their software to use.
Yeah, I mean, like tools are designed for specific purposes. You can use them in other kinds of ways, but when you do try to use something for everything, I think it gets clunky, right? Like I know some people use Obsidian for task management, and for the projects thing I was talking about, that is the only stuff that goes in there is stuff that's related to the book when I'm in the middle of writing and I want it there. But all my other task management, project management stuff is either in OmniFocus when it's for me, and then if I'm working with collaborative, like some kind of collaborative project and I have to delegate stuff, that's in ClickUp. And I'm not going to try to bring all of that into Obsidian for some like meta everything thing, because that's not how I want to use it. So I'm happy to use Airtable for relational databases. I can link back and forth. OmniFocus for tasks and project management. And I can, because with OmniFocus, I can grab a link to one of the things and link it into Obsidian. With ClickUp, that is like, I just know that I can see overviews of large scale projects and I can delegate out to whoever is working on those things, and I'll just leave that there. And then, so on and so forth, like leave the tools, like the script can live there. And like, you have to get into these sort of workflow. This is what frustrates some people. Like, I don't want to work with 3 or 4 tools. Like, don't make me learn a new thing. And then I have to weigh that sometimes with, but this thing is really good at this. And if you try to put that into this, you're having to learn fewer tools, but now you're going to get into all these hiccups and frustrations and friction points because it wasn't designed to be used in that kind of way.
Yeah, well, and that's, things, I appreciate the artistry, actually, behind making a thing that's designed to be used in a certain way. Like, I think I really like a good opinionated app, something that like resists you because it's like, no, this is how you do it. In fact, I'm trying to think if I can come up with a good example. There's lots of great independent apps on, at least on, the Mac and iOS platforms have typically, there's attracted independent developers who I think have a really good, like I use an app for just made by a single person just for tracking like books I want to read and like movies I want to watch. And I'm like, there's no better place for this other than like, I need a place to put this. It's not, I don't want to see this in any other place where it might be like stressing me out. Like this is just the good stuff, fun stuff. So somebody makes an app, and it like makes the thumbnails of all the book, art and movie posters like really big and rich and front and center, and it's nice to just kind of scroll through. And every now and then, if I'm just thinking like, oh, what am I going to do later once my kids are in bed? I'm just like, I scroll through some nice thumbnails. But if you can imagine, there was a time where I was much less wise, and I would put that kind of stuff in OmniFocus. Which, no judgment if you or anyone else does that. But that's for me. It's like, okay, well, here's a thing that's like really specifically very good at this, and I'm so happy to just have an extra little round rectangle icon on to click on for it. Like, no big deal. You've got me a little inspired to like reinvestigate Obsidian and DevonThink in some ways that they were working for me, which I've kind of distanced myself from them. But nice. Those are definitely some of the tools that have compelled me most over the past several years. I'd say like the PKM app thing has been like probably the biggest change to my productivity workflow in the past decade. So, these note-taking apps that are a little bit richer and give you this way to like link from one thing to another is really compelling to me. And I live by these things. I also think there's just like so much information that people put in Google Docs and Microsoft Word just because they don't know another tool. But those are like, so much of this stuff is just like, a lot of information is just text, and like putting that in a simpler tool where you can get around it a little bit more easily. And I gotta say, like, for all my critiques of Obsidian over the years, it's really like very fast on the Mac. I don't think a window resizes more smoothly. I'm just resizing the window right now because of how smooth the how smoothly it does it. Like, it's just a very nimble and quick application.
I think it's also a way of thinking. Like, there is a way of thinking relationally, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about it. I guess for any, like, a wiki, there are multiple kinds of things, like you were talking about Notion, when you can link and embed. The whole idea of thinking relationally, I think, is a positive thing, and I think is really helpful for music teachers to kind of think about all the connections you can make to something. And when an app, instead of like having to force relational thinking into an app, when it is sort of designed for it, it really helps facilitate that way of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. This has been awesome. I'm really looking forward to, talking more about this stuff, especially some apps you're using. Where are you on the internet?
Yeah, I think the best place people can reach me is evantobias.net, because it has all my contact information. It has a link to my newsletter. It has a link to the podcast. It will have information in the book that's coming out eventually. So just go to evantobias.net and find me and connect with me. Amazing. And say hi.
Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Robby. This is a lot of fun for me.
We should do this again sometime. Not too long from now. Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. I hope you subscribe to the show and review it in your favorite podcast app. You can find me at robbyburns.com. The show is edited by Jay Matejko. Design work is by Ryan Bailey. Everything else is by me. See you next time.